It's time to take off your clothes, enjoy clothes-free living, and join us for Naked, Nudists, and Naturists.
Welcome to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, the show that celebrates clothes-free living for all. I'm your host, Frank Stone.
And I'm your correspondent, Lisa Monroe, and I'll be reporting on all things within the Naturist community. So it's time to get naked and join us.
And enjoy clothes-free living on Naked, Nudists, and Naturists. Welcome in to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, episode 4 today. Thank you for being with us. We give you a brand new show every Saturday morning. That gets you ready for the weekend. In case you weren't thinking about it, you wake up, you fire up this show and say, you know what? Off come the clothes today. Off to a resort, off to a club, off to the nude beach. I'm going to enjoy clothes-free living. And you can always find us at our website, nakednudistandnaturist.com. And we want to hear from you early and often as well through email, nakedforevermore@gmail.com. That's nakedforevermore@gmail.com. And tell us about your life in naturism. Are you in it? Are you discovering it? Are you checking it out? Are you thinking about it? Have you tried it? And let us know what your experiences have been. I can guarantee you, if you approach it correctly and just accept yourself as you are and accept everybody else as they are, and the clothes come off, you will have an inner peace. You'll have a calmness that comes about you because you will have accepted yourself and everybody else in the world around you for who they are and what they are, and not get caught up in all the trappings of life. And she has a better dress than I do. He has a nicer three-piece suit than I do. Forget all that nonsense. We were born naked. Let's continue to live naked. How's that for a plan? We are going to get into it fairly quickly today. We have a lot to give you today. Our correspondent, Lisa Monroe, will be with us in just a moment. She's with us on every show, giving us her report in the world of naturism, find out what's going on out there from her perspective. And we will have part 2 of my interview with the terrific STÉPHANE Deschênes. Remember, he is the owner of Oaks Family Naturist Park near Toronto. He also has his own naturism podcast, the Naturist Living Show. You can find that wherever podcasts are available. And he's the president of the International Naturist Federation. I call him the godfather of naturism because he's been doing it for a very long time at a high level, and he is out there all the time on radio, TV, print media, talking about the joys of naturism. So we'll get to part 2 of my interview with STÉPHANE Deschênes in just a few moments. And again, you're listening to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists, a brand new show every Saturday morning. Send us an email. Let us know your thoughts and your experiences at nakedforevermore@gmail.com. Let's get to correspondent Lisa Monroe. Well, good morning, Lisa Monroe. How are you today?
Good morning, Frank. I'm doing fantastic today.
I see you're 100% naked and living the naturist life, clothes-free.
Absolutely. Is there any other way to live? I mean, I really do wish you could go to the grocery like this, but I guess they kind of frown on that, unfortunately, where I am. So
Apparently so. I've never actually tried it. Maybe we should try that today just to see if maybe it's acceptable and we don't know it.
oh well, that's is it also okay to be naked in jail? Unfortunately, that's
Yeah.
probably where we'd end up. But
We do not encourage people to try that. I was merely trying to be humorous.
no,
Do not go to the grocery store with no clothes on and tell them that Frank and Lisa told you to do it. No, don't do that.
exactly.
You do that, you're
I
on
think
your own.
this is time for a public service announcement. Check
That's
your
right.
local nudity rules in your community and make sure you're not violating any of them. They
That's right.
tend to
But
frown on that.
yeah, but if we do a good enough job here, as well as other people who are out there spreading the word, maybe someday it will be okay to do that. That would be nice.
That would be a lovely world, wouldn't it? It would be a great world if it was just a choice that, no everyone has to do it, but the people who choose to do it can do it without being chastised or ostracized or, have, things thrown at them. So that's an ideal world, but we can hope for that.
When it becomes normal, then it's natural, and vice versa. If it's natural, it's normal. And I don't know, a year or two ago, I was at a restaurant, just a local chain restaurant, nothing fancy. I think I was there for breakfast or lunch. And there was this table, about 8 people seated there, and that involved a baby and some moms and dads and whatever. And this woman who was in full view of me, I just happened to be looking in her direction from where I was seated as to where she was seated, just pulled her top right down and started breastfeeding her baby in public. Now, most women, throw a towel over or a blanket to try to conceal what's going on. It's obvious what's going on, but everything's covered up. This woman didn't give a darn whatsoever. Just, my top is off, my baby is breastfeeding, and if you have a problem with it, the door is over there. I mean, she wasn't arrogant about it, but in fact, she didn't draw attention to herself at all. But I thought, now that's how it's supposed to be. Normal,
Exactly.
natural human function, baby breastfeeding. Hello, been doing that since the beginning of time. Yet we've even ostracized that to a degree, haven't we?
We really have. And I think there are some communities that are being much more open about that now. And breastfeeding is not considered a violation of any law. And most places, approve it now. But I would say that a lot of someone would complain if it was very blatantly open like that. And they shouldn't. This is a natural function. It's a natural part of our bodies and the process of creating life. So it's ridiculous to say it's okay to watch a cat nurse its kittens, but it's not okay to watch a mother nurse her baby, and that's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
it's the way it is.
They even have a movement out there. I'm not overly familiar with it, but I've heard about it. I've heard people talk about it, called Free the Nipple. Men can walk around town with no shirts on. They can cut the grass in the front yard with no shirts on. Women, for the most part, cannot. And that's always seemed unfair to me. Any particular thought on that? Should
Well,
women be allowed to have?
I've always thought it's very unfair too. And I guess one of the things that I kind of grew, the one of the reasons that naturism became important to me was that I really hate tan lines, and I grew up in the South. I grew up in the sun, and it was natural going to the beach, and I always hated not being able to just not worry about the top. And so I think that yeah, I'm very much in favor of that. And again, it comes back to it's our body. It's not, we're not offering it out there for someone to ogle. We're just wanting to enjoy the freedom of being in the sun and the air and everything, and be free. So I think, yeah, I'm all for the free the nipple.
Yeah. Well, every time I run outside, I never have a shirt on when I run. Never, ever, ever. It sticks to me. It gets
Yeah,
uncomfortable. So I rather than wait for that moment, I just start off with no shirt on and go from there. I was running in a park. It's one of those parks that has a track around the perimeter of it. So you just run around the park
right.
like 2 miles or whatever. And I was running along, and I passed this woman who was coming toward me, and she said, "Wow, you look pretty good with no shirt on. Must be nice." And I said, "Well, you can join me if you want." She goes, "Yeah, right. Not in this country." And I thought,
No,
she's right.
no,
It's sad. She was getting hot and uncomfortable in her shirt,
yeah.
and she had no way out. My way, I had a way out from the beginning. Not fair, is it?
No, it isn't fair. And there is a movement in Europe, in Germany especially, it may be fairly restricted, but women at swimming pools can now take their tops off.
Yeah.
So there's a relaxation of things like this in Europe because they look at things very differently than we do. And so, we just kind of like that to start happening here. And I think there are some places that people are trying to make that happen,
Mhm.
but it's going to be very difficult to
Yeah.
change a lot of ordinances and a lot of minds.
Yep.
All it's going to
Definitely
take
so.
is one of the quote unquote Karen types, or to come up and start, creating an issue. And unfortunately, sometimes the majority does not rule
Yeah.
in the U.S. So it's difficult, but it's just awful to think that you can't be comfortable when you're trying to do things
Yeah.
because of restrictions.
No, I can't imagine running with a shirt on, and then I always feel sorry for the women. They have to keep a shirt on.
Yep.
Not fair. But we want to talk a little bit about the World Naked Bike Ride today. I've never done that. I've wanted to. I just never lived close enough to one that would make it worth my while. But what do you know about that? Have you seen one? Have you been to one? Have you done one?
Well, actually, I have seen one by
Okay.
total accident.
Yeah.
I was in New Orleans for the weekend, with some friends, and just kind of walking down Bourbon Street, enjoying the craziness that is New Orleans and the French Quarter. And I started hearing all this commotion. I knew there was a lot of people around, but it was tourist season. I didn't think anything about it. Well, the next thing I know is here comes a bunch of people on bikes naked.
Yeah.
and
Okay.
and it was like, what is this? And so someone who was nearby said it's the naked bike ride. And they have it every year here, and it's been going on for a long time. And it was the first time I had ever heard of it, knew anything about it. And it was wild because there were all these people, young, old, all kinds of body shapes, all kinds of things, all riding bikes. Some did have on like a bathing suit bottom, or even some women had on just bikinis. They weren't completely nude, but for the most part, everyone was, and they don't have to be. That's one of the things about this. But their bikes were decorated because, from what I heard, this started kind of as a save the planet kind of effort, and so where they were getting their message out about conservation and everything. And so people would have their bikes decorated. Sometimes there were political messages, but for the most part, there was just a bunch of naked people
Yeah.
riding bicycles down the middle of Bourbon Street. And
Yeah.
it was kind of fun.
They do that in a lot of cities. And I talked to this one guy who does a lot of them in Europe, especially in the UK. I guess they have a lot of them there, or a big one. I'm not sure how many he's done, but it sounds like quite a bit. And he said basically you just show up, get your bike out of the car, take your clothes off, leave them in the car, and then you get lined up and you just go for a nice joyous bike ride. It's not a race or anything. Or some, I guess some have a race element to it, but for the most part, he said no. You just go through the town, and it's already been, they have to have a license for that or a permit. He goes, then when it's over, he goes, it usually ends at a park, maybe that starts at a park and ends at the same park. And then people just stand around all day and they, drink soft drinks or beer and, have sandwiches while keeping their clothes off, because I guess they can do this for a number of hours per their permit. And wouldn't it be great if we could do that just every day without a special day or a special permit?
It certainly would be. And, unfortunately, I did a little bit of reading after that about this. And there was one place, I think it was Seattle or Portland. I think it might have been Seattle, where the police decided they were going to arrest people. And they did. And those cases were eventually thrown out of court. And now it's pretty much at a point where the police go, okay, you can do this now, and they stay away. And because the last thing the police want to be shown as corralling a bunch of naked people and taking them to jail. It's not a good
Right.
image for them.
Right.
So I think that some of the rules have been relaxed in that respect. It's still not as free and open here as it is in Europe.
Right.
And
Mm.
so, I mean, there they just get naked, go bike. No one cares. Everyone has fun. It's a fun time. It's a way of expressing yourself. They, like I said, they decorate their bikes. They have a good time, and it's just something I think that brings a very positive vibe
Mhm.
to being naked. It's not. There's
Yeah.
nothing about it other than just fun and freedom, and we need more of that.
Yeah. Well, you see the photos and videos online of these naked bike rides, and I don't see any angry people in the crowd.
No,
Everybody seems happy. It's a good time. Of course, it's a good time, as it should be. And maybe one of these days, part of our mission on this show, as well as the other shows that are out there, is to make it normal and natural so we can experience the clothes free living and just the joys that we were meant to have, right?
absolutely. And there are times when it's angering to me because I want to go outside
Mhm.
just to go run to the mailbox or go, in the backyard. And unfortunately, I don't have a private backyard. I can't really run out there without, someone possibly seeing. And that's aggravating because
Yeah.
it's like I'm restricted by what I choose to do because of someone else's sensibilities.
Yeah, that's a very
And
good way to put
that's
it.
what I think is the biggest fallacy of this whole thing. Those people don't need to care what I do, but they do.
That's right. Well, always good to talk to you. Maybe we'll follow up on this World Naked Bike Ride thing in a future show. But it's been Lisa Monroe, our naturist correspondent. Lisa, thank you much. Stay extra naked today and throughout the week. We'll see you next time.
And you too, Frank. Stay extra naked, and we'll talk soon.
I certainly will.
All
Thank you.
right. Bye bye.
Bye. And of course, that's Lisa Monroe, our weekly correspondent on naturism. Can you hear the joy in her voice? Can you hear the happiness when she presents the information on naturism? There's one woman who gets it, who understands the clothes free living is the way to go. It brings a calmness to you, it brings an acceptance, and it just makes you an overall happier person. You can hear her voice, it's full of joy, full of happiness, living the clothes free life. You're listening to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists today, episode 4. Thank you for being with us. We'd also like to hear from you. Hit up our website, nakednudistandnaturist.com, and also send us an email how naturism is working for you. If you have any questions, any comments, we'd love to hear them. nakedforevermore@gmail.com. That's nakedforevermore@gmail.com. Well, let's get to part 2 now of my interview with Stéphane Deschênes. As you already know, he is the owner of Oaks Family Naturist Park near Toronto. He also has his own podcast on naturism, has been doing so since around 07 or 08. It's called the Naturist Living Show, and he's also the current president of the International Naturist Federation. Let's get to it right now. Part 2 of my interview with Stéphane Deschênes. And, I heard you say on another show at some point in the past, I'm not sure, it might have even been your own show, but I'm not totally sure about that either. And you also mentioned a few moments ago, your staff is nude as well. And I've checked with some other clubs. That's not necessarily the norm from club to club. Is that correct? Or is that becoming the norm? Or is it just something you thought, we're running a naturist place for goodness sakes. We probably ought to, be naturists here as well. And the second part of that question, do naturists only apply for these jobs? Or is it like somebody who says, hey, I need a summer job. Okay, I have to take my clothes off. No problem. I mean, how does that all work out for you?
Well, because they're summer jobs, so they tend to be, yes, they are nude. And you kind of said that. And because they are summer jobs, because we are in Canada and we are open in the winter, but it's much quieter, so we don't need nearly as much staff.
Right.
So we're hiring people for 4 or 5 months, and so they tend to be young university students that are, they're off there from college and they are trying to earn some money for the summer. So many of them actually are not naturists before. It's their first time and it's their first experience. Some are, but I would say every year there's several that are first time experience. And it's people in the beginning, when I said that's what our plan was, and I'll explain why that's our plan. Said you can't do that. You'll never find staff. We've actually had no problem finding staff. Even this year, when a lot of restaurants and a lot of retail places are having trouble filling staff after the pandemic, we had no problem. We had far more applications than we needed. And that's, but we pay better than average. We pay more than minimum wage, and we provide free accommodations because we're only half an hour from Toronto, but that's if you have a car. So
true, yeah.
we have staff accommodations and everything else, and we don't charge for that. So they can basically bank all their money for when they go back to school. So the reason that our staff is not wearing clothes is because that's the way it used to be. Traditionally in naturism, nobody wore clothes when it was a movement about, as we talked about, equality and leveling the playing field, right? If you look at it from that standpoint, it would be kind of an insult for the staff to be wearing a uniform, because that's not being their true self. That's putting something on them that is not for protection. It's there to rank them, and it just seems inappropriate to me as a person who believes in what the movement was originally about. But most naturism in the world has become very commercial. And we're commercial too. Don't you have to pay, and there is money. I am not ashamed of being commercial. I do. That's the way our system works. And I'm not, some of our prices for some things that are more luxurious are expensive, like our large grand cabin. So I'm no shame about the commercial side. But as part of that commercial development, the movement went more recreational, meaning that it was not a philosophy. It was just not wearing a bathing suit. It was just not getting tan lines. It was swimming without anything on. And people forgot that there's a very important intent behind it. There's a very important psychological effect that you are trying to achieve that is healing. And so they forgot that, so they started to be more like the mainstream world, and they put uniforms on their staff, and
Yeah, right.
they didn't push for that. And so yes, it is unusual now. I still think it's the right way to go, but there are most places you go to, when you check in, you will find staff wearing clothes.
Okay, now do you have anything identifying them as staff, like a hat or something, or something on their arm, or how would they be identified?
Well, we've played with that a little bit. We've had hats in the past, but then they don't like to wear them.
Yeah.
Who is staff is obvious because they're behind the counter.
True.
Or they're busy cleaning something. You can usually tell because they might have a walkie-talkie in their hands, or they're driving a golf cart, or they have keys hanging around their neck on a lanyard. It's you're not. It's if you're in the restaurant, the person who comes and asks you if you'd like a drink is obviously staff.
Right.
So that there are. It's not that hard to figure it out. When we've tried to have the hats and things like that, it works and it doesn't work. We do have overalls for the maintenance staff to wear, because sometimes they need protection. And so certainly you can tell they are, but I went out of my way to get very plain overalls that were not fancy, and they're one-piece overalls, so they're very easy to slip in and out of. So when you go into the guest areas and you don't need the protection, you can quickly take them off.
Okay, just curious now, how was that worked out? Because if somebody shows up to apply for a job at a naturist resort and has to work with no clothes, wondering if that's been an issue. But then again, going in, what were you thinking as an applicant? Of course, you'd probably be working without clothes, so that would make sense, right?
Yes, well, that's one of the requirements when you look at the want ad, and of course, when I run the job ads every year, I always get applications. And one of the questions to try to make sure that they read, because people don't read, they just blindly apply to any job sometimes.
Yeah, quite true.
Is I ask them to write in their cover letters or their email why they want to work in a naturist park, and I quickly link them. We have a jobs page so they can read all about the employment. And still, a lot of them don't. And I give them the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes they didn't read, and I say, you're supposed to tell me why you want to work in Naturist Park, and they don't reply then. And so we get a ton of applications that go nowhere, but we still get applications that people who are interested. The most interesting part is when they come for the interview, they know where they're going.
Right.
And I've had many people describe this situation. You're used to going to an interview with your clothes on, which is what they do. So they show up dressed, and they come into this office where the staff is not wearing clothes, and then they're going, I'm not sure I'd be wearing clothes, don't know what to do, but it's their first time. And then I come and get them, and we do the interview. And many of them have said that they're sitting in the interview and they stop hearing what I'm saying because they're going, I want to take my clothes off. I think I should. But it would be really weird for me to stand up right now and start getting undressed.
That's funny.
And this whole thing is running in their head. So, and at some point, I say to them, I need to see them naked. I don't want to look at them naked, but I need to see that they're going to be able to do it.
Right.
And so before they leave, I say, go away, take your time, but you need to, before you leave, and I can agree to consider you for the job, I need to know you're going to be able to do this, and it's not going to be so difficult for you.
Right.
And it never is.
Right.
But I did have one instance of a young man that I hired him remotely, so we could not do an in-person interview.
Right.
And after 48 hours, he left because he couldn't take it. He was too uncomfortable nude.
Sure.
And ironically, a young man, not a woman. So.
Yeah, I would imagine that happens a lot on the one hand, but, people might think that sounds a little bit odd, but at the same time, if you hire somebody and you put them on the payroll and do whatever tax information you have to get from them, and then they show up for work and they say, I just can't take my clothes off, well, then you just wasted a whole bunch of time, money, and energy for no reason.
And then you have to start the hiring process again, right? And it's...
Yeah, right, exactly. And more money, more time, more energy, I'm talking to Stéphane Deschênes this morning, owner of Oaks Family Naturist Park, a little bit north of Toronto. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast a little bit, Stéphane, but before we do that, tell our listeners how they can get a hold of you, find out about your park, all that good stuff.
Well, we have done a pretty good job of making sure we're properly indexed. So if you can just Google Bear Oaks and you will find us from almost anywhere. We're also on some major social media, easy to find, Bear Oaks. I think even if you misspell the bear and you make it like the animal, you'll probably still find us. The website is bearoaks.ca. At the beginning, I was telling you I wanted something that was easy and catchy, and that's part of why this name came up. So Bear Oaks, very simple, 2 words, 2 syllables. .ca. .com will work, but we say .ca because we are in Canada, and that's the domain for Canada. So, and on the website, you can find all of the contact information. Where you can contact us with WhatsApp. You can instant message us or direct message us on the major platforms as well.
Okay, and tell us again, your last name, Deschênes, means what related to oaks?
It means of the oaks. One of my ancestors in Quebec had a property apparently with a lot of oaks, and went by the name. His last name was Miville, so it was Miville Deschênes, so Miville of the Oaks. And then somehow through history, the part of the name disappeared, and I end up with just the Deschênes, which means of the Oaks. In French, you'll find that a lot. You'll have of something, de or du, often for people. Historically, they tended people that were landed nobility, so they were known as that. So you might be known as Paul of Boston, Paul de Boston, because you came from Boston or something like that.
Okay, and then obviously the word bear, well, I'm guessing that's self-explanatory to most people, right? Being a naturist park?
Absolutely, yes, exactly. Exactly, right. Yes. Yeah. We are bear, we are free. We are us.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your podcast. Now, the Naturist Living Show on your page, it has a podcast about naturism for naturists, nudism, and nudists to some people. So just tell me about this. That's what got our attention originally. I didn't know this a year or two ago, and you do really good work. You do very good interviews. You have very interesting people. And I know you have a lady who helps you, I think, with the editing or producing, however that works. But tell us about the genesis of the show and what you've been doing with that and what you plan to do down the road.
Yeah, well, the show, we've been doing it since 2008, so that was very early in the podcasting world. I've always been a bit of a geek. I like to play with technology. You and I, before we started recording, we talked about our gear and our recording gear. And do I need a dozen microphones? No, I only need one to record. So it was, for me, it was a chance to play with something. It's like, oh, look, I can have my own radio show. Like, wow, how cool is that? And it can be available anywhere in the world. And I thought for Naturism it was cool because, when you do radio interviews, they're very ephemeral, right? You do the interview, it airs, and then it's gone. And I used to do interviews, and I thought, that was a good interview. Too bad there's no way for me to share with anybody. Because back then, most radio stations, TV stations didn't put clips on the web either. So I thought, here I can do interviews about interesting topics, and then people can find them. And my intention was not for people discovering naturism even. It was for me and for other naturists to talk about topics, to get more in depth about it. Not just about, hey, we're running around naked. Oh, woohoo. There's a lot behind this. More actually than I thought, because after all these years of doing it, I'm nowhere near running out of topics and ideas to talk about.
Oh, yeah, definitely not. Yeah.
And it gave me a chance to find interesting people and call them and say, hey, I want to talk about your book.
Right.
There was a guy named Michael Hollick who wrote a book called The Vitamin D Solution a number of years ago. And vitamin D from sunshine, we've all heard of it, is important to our health. We're discovering more and more. And so I was able to call him and say, hey, can we talk about your book? And of course, everybody who has a book wants to talk about their book.
That's true.
So it's a lot of fun, right? And you know that. You get to call people and have a chat about any topic, an interesting topic. And that's what kept it going.
And you do have a wide variety of folks on your show, all related somehow, some way, and probably very much so to naturism. I remember hearing you had the one lady on who was heavily into nude skydiving, and she seemed like a very normal lady just down the street, the gal down the street. And it seemed as though she just really enjoyed it, and she tried it and talked about it, a lot more about the actual skydiving, how daunting that is. And, her being nude was no issue whatsoever. The actual jumping out of an airplane was the issue. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. I agree with that.
That's true.
I'm not jumping out of an airplane. Yeah, no.
Yeah. But it's amazing how people discover the life of naturism. Like, I could never do that. And that's, for weirdos down the street. And then they try. It's like, oh, I guess there is something to this. And I felt that came through with her in a lot of ways because she wasn't a naturist to begin with, as I recall, and then somehow became one and decided to try it and then try the skydiving. And now she's fully blown into it. And you have a lot of guests like that, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. It's always interesting how people discover naturism and the ideas. In the case of skydiving, it's a very interesting one. I didn't realize that, but apparently it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a challenge that people give each other, and it's a certain tradition in places that your 100th jump, I think it's called, you're supposed to do nude. That's the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So, ultimately, I think we all like to be naked.
Yeah.
We all like to be free of clothes. We all like to go back to that state of early childhood when we just felt comfortable in our own skin.
Right.
And so sometimes we find these excuses to do these things. And,
It's true.
streaking, skinny dipping,
Sure.
it's all there. And it's in us. People sometimes say to me, well, it's not for everyone.
Right.
I don't agree.
Right.
I think it is for everyone, but not everyone can get there. I understand that.
Right.
But it's not that it's not for everyone. I think everyone benefits from this if they can overcome that incredible body shame that's been laid on them. And it's a phobia. It's a phobia.
Yeah.
It's not a phobia technically because it does not impede with your day-to-day life. That's one of the definitions psychologically of what a phobia is. And no, you never have to be naked in our world. We've built a world around it. We made it illegal to be nude. So no, it doesn't impede you getting a job or anything else, except maybe at Barrows. But it's a phobia because it's an irrational fear. Right? Why do you need a bathing suit to swim? Does it keep you warm?
No.
Does it keep you dry?
Nope.
Does it hide anything really? Really?
Not really, yeah.
Doesn't. It's a completely useless piece of clothing. And yet the thought of going out right now, as we're talking about it, I know some of your listeners are having a reaction to it. Just the thought of it is causing them anxiety because it's that much of a phobia. So yeah, it's hard for people to get over. And I know some people, you have to want to, and you have to push yourself. And some people just can't do it or can't be bothered. But yes, I do think it's for everybody.
Well, even a really bad psychologist will tell us in terms of the subconscious or whatever happened in our childhood that brought pleasure to us subconsciously. We want to repeat that as often as we can. So if you're allowed to run around the house with no clothes on, up until age 2, you might not remember it, but subconsciously that was the most joyous time in your life. And of course, babies who are hugged a lot, they grow up and they want to be hugged by somebody, even at age 40. And that just feels good because subconsciously they go back to a time when they were hugged all of the time. So when you said it is for everybody, that makes perfect sense because we are born that way. And that was probably the best moment of our life. That moment we were born, like, I'm here, I'm free, I have no clothes on, and life has just begun for me here on earth. And do you think subconsciously we'd all like to return to that one moment? And maybe that's part of it too, in terms of naturism?
Yeah, well, I think it's like a chain that's holding us back. It's who likes to feel uncomfortable with themselves and what they look like? Who likes to, that feeling of liberty, of being free? It's a great feeling. That's why it's so addictive to be a naturist and why I don't lose customers. I don't get people who come and do it and go, well, whatever.
Yeah, that's right. I'm out of here. Yeah, you probably don't get that a whole lot.
Yeah. The people who are probably more likely to do that are the ones who had already reached that level where they don't no longer feel the need to prove or push themselves that they're probably nude at home whenever they feel like it and don't even think about it.
Yeah, well, that's something I found out just over the last 10 years or so, talking to friends, bringing this topic up, and they'll tell you that they're nude all of the time in their home. Well, I've never seen any evidence of that because when I go to their home, they're fully dressed and ready to go. And they said, oh, yeah, nobody will ever see me nude. But when I'm home alone, absolutely. The second I walk in, I shut the door and the clothes come off even before I've taken 10 steps into my home. And then, of course, the next question is, well, why don't you do that outside? Why don't you go to Bare Oaks? A family naturist park where you go to the beach and they just don't want to. I mean, for different reasons for different people, but there are a lot of people who go to your park alone and they don't have clothes on. That's absolutely, totally acceptable, right?
Yeah, but you will not achieve that complete liberation until you are able to do it with a whole bunch of people and feel comfortable. Because it's one thing to be by yourself or with somebody. It's a good start. It's a very good start to be with your spouse or your significant other, or just by yourself. That's one thing. But to do it with a group of people, to do a group of strangers, to really normalize it. Is when you really achieve that sense of liberation. And that's why a place like Bare Oaks needs to exist for that reason, because it takes it way beyond. It creates a new normal. It creates a society where clothing is no longer about shame. It's only worn for protection. And that's the thing with children, too. There's a lot of parents who raise their kids and they try to not impart body shame on them. But it doesn't matter. It does matter. It matters to a certain extent. Good parenting is very important. But at some point, no matter what you do, you will tell your children, oh, when there's people in the living room, you can't run around naked. No, you can't go in the front yard naked. No, at the public pool, you cannot swim naked. You have to wear clothes. That's something for your bedroom. And then if that's not enough, they will go to school where a whole bunch of kids will make, penis and jokes or whatever, and they will start to learn that there's shame in those body parts. And so that's where a place like Bare Oaks can give them an alternate narrative if they grow up there, as my children did. So it was the motivation behind us buying the club, actually. It was our young children being able to raise them that way. And so the kids will then see that there's an alternate way of looking at the world, and it's possible. And you only can get that when you are not just with your parents, who, at some point you decided, well, my parents are weird and strange anyway, so they may say it's okay, but I know it's not because everybody else tells me it's not. You need a larger group of people to show you that it's okay to not be ashamed of your body.
Yes, and that makes total sense. And, I've often thought about a society where we just don't wear clothes. We go to the grocery store, we go to the bank, we walk up and down the street, nobody has clothes on. So there's no hierarchy whatsoever. We don't know how much money you make. We don't know or care what you do for a living, we're just human beings existing and cooperating and getting along in life. And you found a town in France. It was on one of your podcast show, a Naturist Living Show. And that's basically what they do there, right? Everybody who goes there or lives there or visits there, the town is nude 24/7. They just coexist and go about life that way, right?
Yes, that's a town. You talk about Cap d'Agde, which in the south of France. Unfortunately, Cap d'Agde is gone in a way that is not naturist.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's,
Wow.
The problem with Cap d'Agde is it's a section of the town. It's not the town itself, and it's still very much aimed towards recreational leisure use. Don't get me wrong, but you can own an apartment there, and you can live there all year round. There's no issue. And it was a wonderful idea, and it worked really well in the beginning, in the 70s and 80s. But it is a section of town, and the problem with that, as it turned out, is that you cannot enforce naturist values. So imagine in your town, right? I cannot enforce how you live your life or what you do with your business or any of that stuff. And so what happened is naturism always attracts, of course, people who have the wrong intention. In terms of the wrong intention of naturism. I don't want to sound judgmental. If you're into swinging or beating each other with whips, whatever, that's all they're all consenting adults. It's not my business, and it makes you happy. Who am I to say? However, that's not naturism. As swinging and sexuality and open sexuality, group sex, whatever it is, not at all naturism, despite the assumption that's probably what happens. It does not happen at Bare Oaks, and it does not happen in naturism. In fact, it's about separating the idea of nudity and sexuality, that the two are not intrinsically linked.
Okay.
But at Cap Dag, as people came in with those looking for that kind of thing, there are some merchants who started providing services for that. And whether it was a nightclub that was kind of a swinging nightclub, or pornography or whatever, people started wearing fetish wear around the part of town. And because you could be nude, nobody could say don't wear that either, because there was no centralized management. At Bear Oaks, or almost every other place that you go to, there is a centralized management. And I can say, no, I'm sorry, you cannot do that, or you cannot wear that. I can limit based on the values of naturism. And unfortunately, Cap Dag has, because it's a town, went more and more in that direction. Because as it started going in the sexual libertine, and French is a French name, I don't know what it is, the liberal sexuality, the free sexuality, the more it went in that direction, the less naturists went. So the commerce, the businesses said, well, we're just going to have to go after this new market because the old market is getting less and less.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a snowball effect, right, as it was rolling down the hill. And I was actually there in May. I was there in May because we were driving through with another couple that we were touring the south of France, and they said, "Well, we got to see it. I know you say it's bad, but we got to see it." I said, "Okay." So we went for the day, and we were on the beach. There was a fair bit of normal naturist kind of nudity, but we know that down the beach where we didn't go, there was a larger grouping of people who were participating in some activities, shall we say. We didn't go look at that. When I was there in the early 90s, in the shopping area, it was everything. There was banks, there was bakeries, butchers, grocery stores, souvenir shops, everything you could imagine. Now, I would say 80% of them were stores selling fetish wear.
Oh, wow.
All kinds of strange stuff. It has really gone in that direction.
Yeah, not good.
And for those who are looking for it, good for you. That's the place to go. My only objection is it's called a naturist village, and it's not. It is there's no naturist values behind that.
Right.
It is unique that you feel like you are walking in a city nude. We were walking, the four of us, completely nude through there. You know, it was sidewalks all paved and everything, and gas stations and everything else. It's very unique feeling from that standpoint. Right. Except we were pretty much the only ones nude. Most people were fully dressed because they were not on the beach, or wearing some really outrageous fetish wear. Like, it was one woman wearing this fishnet dress, which I thought, that's the absolute worst of everything, because you have the discomfort of clothing. It looks kind of rough, right? Because it's like a fishnet, but you can see right through it in a kind of teasing way. It's like, I don't, you know. So Cap Dag, unfortunately, is not a place I would recommend for anybody interested in naturism. And I really wish they would remove that term from the sign at the front, because it's not a naturist village.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. I just assumed, without looking heavily into it, that it was still some kind of sort of what it set out to be.
Yeah, there's a bunch of still older documentaries where it is correct. It is the way it was when you look at the older documentary. Then it was naturist, but it's not anymore.
Is that the essential difference between naturism and nudism? Naturism is everything you've described, just living your life without clothes, no hang-ups, no hierarchy or whatever. And nudism is more, hey, let's get together and do some other things. Or am I wrong on that?
You're not wrong if you're in Europe.
Okay.
But in the United States, nudism, a lot of nudists, the American Association for Nude Recreation, for example, uses the word nudists and nudism.
Right.
And they mean a philosophy like I do, a life philosophy,
right,
like I do when I talk about naturism.
Okay.
I personally just prefer the term naturist because it takes the emphasis away from the nudity. Nudity is not the objective.
Right.
Nudity is a tool to get people to be comfortable with themselves and show respect to others by presenting their true, authentic self and living in a more way that's more natural. You're being your natural self.
Right.
And so that's why I prefer naturism, because that's the natural as opposed to the nudity.
Okay.
The nudity in Europe, it's true. When you talk about a nudist, you talk about people who are nude for no particular reason other than possibly sexual reasons.
Oh, okay.
But I would not put that on anybody who calls themselves a nudist in the United States or in some other countries. Like, for example, in Mexico,
Mm.
nudismo is used because the naturist, or whatever the Spanish variation, is already taken by health food people.
Oh,
What
okay.
it means is depends on where you are, and what it means is what it means to you is really what matters, and understanding it. Unfortunately, you cannot control how people use the term, as in Capdag, where they are using the term, and I want to take it away from them, but I don't own it and I can't control it.
Right.
Nor does the French Naturist Federation, who also completely disagrees with what's going on over there.
Okay. So they definitely do disagree with that?
Yes, the French Naturist Federation does not recognize Capdag as a naturist destination.
Okay, well, it's good to have that information out there. So what's coming up on your show, the Naturist Living Show with Stéphane Deschênes? Any interviews planned?
It comes and goes, as I'm very busy. I try to do at least one a month, but we've been doing a little bit more because we're getting some support through Patreon, which means I can pay Samantha to do all the editing. As you know, that's the biggest part of the job is to edit the podcast afterwards and get it live. I've got a number of interviews lined up. I've got a lot of ideas. I'm going to be interviewing some researchers. I'm doing one on Dr. Maurice Parmalee, who is the American that wrote pretty much the book on naturism in 1927 and then published it many, many times up until the 50s. I interviewed his daughter, who's still alive, and I'm doing one on children and families, which I've been meaning to do since 2008, but I'm finally getting to because it's a big topic and I want to cover it correctly. I have, I've got tons of stuff. It just keeps coming up. It's just trying to find a time to find the people to interview them and coordinate it, right?
That's true, yeah.
Which you also understand.
Oh, yeah. There's no shortage of topics, just a matter of getting them in. And, I actually reduced, I think, I don't know when this was, 4 or 5 years ago, I reduced myself to a schedule. Rather than go, fly by the seat of my pants.
Right.
I could easily get crazy and do 1,000 interviews a week if I'm not careful. And so I relegated it to a certain amount each week. I will fit it in. If I can't make it this week, we'll make it the next week or the week after that. Otherwise, you could just spend all day in front of your microphone interviewing people and getting nothing else done, including running your resort or traveling around the world.
Exactly.
Could easily be interview, post, and do it again. I should have said this at the very beginning of the interview. Instead of calling you Stéphane Deschênes, I should have said Mr. President Stéphane Deschênes. Is that correct? You're now the president of, why don't you just tell us, the international organization?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
I'm president of the International Naturist Federation. There's actually currently two presidents because there's a transition between the old president and the current president, where Sieglinde is doing most of the day-to-day, and I'm working on some changes and things like that. So it's working actually quite nicely. So, the International Naturist Federation is it's like the United Nations. It's not a governing body for naturism. It is like the UN. It brings all of the country federations that really help promote naturism in each country under one umbrella, where we can all share and learn from each other and cooperate on some projects. For example, you may have seen the research by Dr. Keon West recently out of the UK. Yeah. He's doing sociological research on naturists there, and he found in his earliest one that naturists are happier generally in their life than non-naturists by doing some research. And so that is being funded by many federations because we all benefit from that. And we're going to be cooperating in some future research. Every 2 years, there's a Congress where we all get together and share. And it's just like the UN. You have simultaneous translations and with everything else except no clothes.
Well, if it's not a governing body, then what is the overall goal under the International Naturist Federation, or however you said that? Is it just to promote and get the word out, and here's what we're doing, and here's what we think you should do?
Yeah, the INF is 70 years old next year,
wow.
Which is, it was early on. We saw the need as naturists to cooperate and coordinate efforts. So it is like the UN. The UN has no power. The UN cannot tell Canada, the United States, Mexico what to do.
Right.
But it's a place where we all get together and create cooperative projects. UNESCO, for example, the UN has UNESCO to recognize heritage sites and things like that around the world. So the INF similarly does projects that benefit all naturists that we agree on. And you learn a lot from each other by sharing and by getting together, right? And so there's a great advantage, and it makes it easier when you travel because there is shared information, that kind of thing. It used to be very important back before the internet when the only international guide was published by the INF. So when you traveled, you had a book that you could buy from the INF, and it was the only way you could find it, right? Think about it. No internet. How do I find out where to go in France or in Spain or wherever we had this guide that was published by the INF. So similarly, there's still a website, but frankly, it's not the best website in the world. It's good. It's got a lot of information, but there's a lot of improvements that could be done there.
Okay. Well, overall, and what is your goal as president? I know you told me it's your first term. Now, you might run for a second term, and then that's it. You can only have 2 terms max. So whether you stay 1 term or 2 full terms, any particular goals on your agenda to get things through or to push naturism a little more, and anything in particular you're looking at?
Well, I've said if I have number one goal is to get more participation and involvement. People have kind of given up on the INF because they felt it didn't have a place for them. And I want to encourage more involvements from volunteers and from federations and more cooperative projects. And it has been a challenge because there's been a transition, right? The INF has lost a lot of revenue because you used to have to be an INF member to visit almost any club, and you don't anymore. And you used to be able to only find out about clubs if you bought the guide from the INF, but now the internet makes finding information very easily. There's still an important role for the INF, but it has to transition to a different way of doing it. It has to work differently. It has to recognize that it is there for the federations first, not for naturists.
Right.
And that might seem counterintuitive, but it's true. If you think of the United Nations. As an individual citizens, you don't deal with the United Nations. It's for the countries to help the countries be stronger and cooperate and work together. And similarly, you may never have heard the INF. If you're in Europe, you have a little stamp on the back of your card from the INF showing that you're a member. That used to mean something. I don't know that it means that much anymore, unfortunately. And that's okay. It's up to us to now make it more meaningful once again.
Okay, so it's probably not every country in the world, but most of the countries or many countries have an affiliation with the INF?
Yeah, well, most of the countries have naturism. I think it's 37, but I'm just pulling that number out of my head, so I may be wrong, but it's somewhere around that number. 37 countries that are members. And
okay, now what about an individual business like yours, Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park? Are you also a member, or is it only for more the global concerns?
I am a member through the Federation of Canadian Naturists. So I'm a member through my country federation. I'm also a member because I've joined multiple federations, not necessary, but I think it's important to support them. So I'm a member of AANR in the U.S., American Association for Nude Recreation. I'm a member of the Naturist Society, which is actually not a member of the INF because only one federation is recognized under the Constitution of the INF per country, one federation per country. I don't personally agree with that, but I didn't create the organization or the Constitution. So yeah, it's people are members of the federations or a member of a club. So people who join the Federation of Canadian Naturists in Canada are also indirectly members of the INF. That gives a certain credibility to the movement and to be international as well. Because when you do a press release and it is by multiple countries and the International Naturist Federation, it absolutely gets more attention and credibility than if it's just done by one country.
Okay, well, that makes sense. And now I'm almost afraid to ask this next question, but I'll ask it anyway. Now, you're running this Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. It's a full-time deal for you, and obviously it's your business. You're doing this podcast. I'm guessing that takes 25 hours a day. So how many more hours does this INF presidency take? How much has it added to your weekly schedule, even on the average?
Oh, I don't know, but it's a lot of travel. I've been to Europe. Let me see. I was in, since October, I've been in France several times, Serbia, Slovenia, Luxembourg.
Wow.
and Spain.
Wow,
I think
okay.
I've got them all. So that's a fair bit of travel, which is nice. I mean, who doesn't like to travel?
Sure.
But it's also tiring and it takes time.
Right.
What you don't know is I also own another business,
Oh.
another full-time job as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's actually my main source of income.
Okay.
We do continuing education for architects and engineers.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm funny that way because while many people are professional and hide their naturist side,
Yeah.
I am very public about my naturist side,
Yeah.
and I don't hide my other profession, but
Yeah.
I don't promote it because that doesn't need the promotion the way that naturism does. So
Yeah, that makes
a lot of
sense.
people don't know about it. So yes, I guess I have 3 full-time jobs or so, or something like that. Yeah.
Well, you just don't have enough to do in life, right? That's the problem, right?
Yeah, well, the key to be able to do a lot is to have a lot of good people you work with, and so that it can support you and help you. So that's what I do. I have for the podcast, I've got Samantha. That otherwise, I probably would have given up by now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I thought you were going to say, because somebody said this once to me before. They said the key to doing a lot is to get out there and do a lot.
Yes,
It's
well.
really as simple as that, isn't it? That, basically, if you sit on your couch all day, you're not going to be president of the INF. You're not going to run a resort. You're not going to do a podcast. You're just going to sit on your couch. So get out there and get going. And you're certainly evidence of somebody who does that, aren't you?
I try.
Definitely so. It's been great to talk to you. It's the second time talking to you, and you always are a wealth of information. A lot of people initially look at this, a bunch of people taking their clothes off, a bunch of weirdos, a bunch of wackos. 100% not the case, though. And you prove that every time you speak and speak out on this, whether it's your own show or other shows, including this show right here. It's normal and it's natural. And I still think, based on the research that others have done, I'm not a psychologist, but it goes back to that early psychological issue when you were born. You have no clothes on and you felt like $1,000,000, and there's something about wanting to return to that. If people will try it, they realize, it's pretty good. And nobody called me fat or skinny or ugly or whatever else. And I can actually do this. And so hats off to you for continuing to promote this on a full-time basis.
Well, thank you very much, Paul. That's very kind.
Oh, you bet. And again, Stéphane Deschênes runs the Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park, a little north of Toronto, does his Naturist Living Show, a podcast about naturism for naturists. And Stéphane, before we let you go, tell our listeners again how they can find you, how they can find out about Bear Oaks, and how they can access your Naturist Living Show podcast.
Just search on your favorite search engine, which is probably Google, Bear Oaks, BAREOAKS, or go to bearoaks.ca. Our website is full of information.
Okay, excellent. We'll go out there and have a great day, sir. I was going to ask you what you're going to wear today, but that would be a silly question.
I'm already dressed for work.
That's true. And, for dinner and for everything else you're going to do today and later tonight. Stéphane Deschênes, Bear Oaks Family Naturist Resort, a Naturist Living Show, a podcast. Go out there and have a great day, sir. We'll talk again soon.
Take care.
All right. Thank you. The terrific Stéphane Deschênes from the Toronto area, a little bit north of Toronto. Proprietor, owner of Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. You can check them out at bearoaks.ca. He's also the host of his own podcast show, The Naturist Living Show, and you can get a link to that show and all of previous episodes from his Bear Oaks website, again, bearoaks.ca. So check him out and check out all that he has to say, and we thank Stéphane Deschênes for all of his time on this morning's show. And there you go, my complete interview now with Stéphane Deschênes. If you missed part 1, that was on episode 3, you can fire that up. But get to Toronto, and when you do, say hello to Stéphane Deschênes and his park, Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park near Toronto. Also has his own podcast on naturism and has had that for a long time now, the Naturist Living Show, and he's the current president of the International Naturist Federation. And we do thank Stéphane Deschênes for all of his time. I call him the godfather of naturism. He's been out there a long time promoting the clothes-free lifestyle. We appreciate all you've done, Stéphane. Keep up the great work, and everybody else, check him out. Well, you've been listening to Naked, Nudists, and Naturists. We give you a brand new show every Saturday morning. This has been episode 4. Check out our website, nakednudistsandnaturists.com, and also our email address. We want to hear from you early and often. nakedforevermore@gmail.com. That's nakedforevermore@gmail.com. Plan to join us for every single one of our shows here and have your clothes off when you're listening. We have our clothes off when we're broadcasting, enjoying the naturist life.
We celebrate clothes-free living for all. Remember to enjoy being naked and join us again for Naked Nudists and Naturists.
We drop a brand new show every Saturday morning, so come back and join us. Have your clothes off when you do for Naked Nudists and Naturists. Have a great clothes-free day.